Hello, my name's Katie Wicks and I'm an actor and writer, and I have written a memoir called Delicacy, which is out this week. So I've decided to sit down with some very interesting and talented people to discuss some of the themes that I explore in the book, such as loss, creativity and body image. So today I'm talking to writer and actor Temi Wilkey about playwriting. Her debut play, The High Table, was produced at the Bush Theatre in 2020 and won the Stage Debut Award for Best Writer. She was a writer on the Netflix series Sex Education and is currently developing an adaptation of an award-winning novel. She was just listed as one of Forbes 30 Under 30. Hi Temi, nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So you did National Youth Theatre,
Yeah.
as did I as
Oh,
well.
did you?
Was that how you became interested in writing and acting?
I feel like National Youth Theatre is a really great space for people who are actors, but also like more than actors.
I sometimes still feel a bit apologetic. I don't want someone to think that I'm doing too many things or that I'm getting a bit too big for my boots by...
I think I always used... So I recently did The Artist's Way, the like Julia
Oh,
Cameron
yes,
thing.
yes, I've been doing that. Morning Pages.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a bit in it that talks about like you're jealous of the people that you actually kind of want to be. And I've always had this weird thing about Kenneth Branagh. Like I'm always like, ugh, like writing and directing and starring in like your own thing. Like you're so indulgent. What a twat. Sorry, Kenneth. But then recently, I don't know, with like people like Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Michaela Cole, I feel like I am obsessed with them, but also probably a part of me is a bit jealous of them. And then I think doing that made me realise like, oh, I just love to do all the things. Like, and that I'm allowed to do that. And I think especially as a woman, you feel like it's a bit indulgent to do that.
Yeah, like I suppose it's that almost fear of being too much that I think a lot of women I know have. Amongst my comedy friends, it's much more sort of normal that you write and perform your own material. And the sort of ideal is to be performing your own material because it's such complete artistic control and you know how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
You saying about Kenneth Branagh, my mum had this thing every time he'd come on screen, she'd be like, oh, his mouth is so thin. Like, his mouth is so thin. I can't enjoy this because of his mouth.
I feel so bad.
Cut that out. It's really bizarre, isn't it? And I remember once going to a private members club in London about sort of 1 a.m. and this is relevant, I promise, I'm just bragging. And the woman on the sort of reception bit was like, guys, no, we're full to capacity. And then this big booming voice behind me went, I'm Kenneth Branagh's brother. Let me through. And we all turned around and a guy who looked loads like Kenneth Branagh just stood
Imagine
there.
if he wasn't Kenneth Branagh's brother.
Is it. So for the rest of the night, because we did get in as well, because he was like, all my friends were in. We were like,
what a legend.
We're
Okay, I love
Kenneth
this guy.
So we all sort of sat around going, oh, there he is. And he sat at the bar, like, you know, holding court. And he definitely wasn't. He definitely wasn't. Because the drunker he got, I think we asked him at 2 a.m, like, and he was like, no, I just looked like him.
That was so good.
Fun. Yeah.
What a hero. I think sometimes, like, when you're kind of zeitgeisty, then everybody compares your work to that. Like, I like having like conversations in development for TV shows. It's like, oh yeah, you kind of want it to be a bit Fleabag, and you're like, don't say that because that is like a beautiful pinnacle of art, and like to compare everything that a writer who's like a little fledgling baby is trying to do to something that's, you know, wholesome and has been made is not conducive to making good work.
It also is maybe that thing as well of like, for so long the kind of male experience has been the sort of everyone's experience, like normal, and that when a woman writes something, it's about being a woman, it's a woman's experience, and that all gets compared, whereas the male experience is just life. It's like we're over here, it's like our own category. Like did you daydream a lot as a kid? Was it like fantasy was your because someone pointed out to me, it was a writer, I can't remember who it was, that how much writing for theatre is like playing with dolls when you were a child. Yes. And I thought, actually, that makes so much sense. Like, I was so interested in scenes from such a young age. It didn't really matter what it was. It'd be like a rock or something. It would be like just making scenes and play.
And I think the reason that I started writing is because as an actor, you only get to play one part, but as a writer, you get to play them all, and figure out what they're all going to say to each other. You get the fun of doing them all.
Do you know the playwright Annie Baker?
Yeah.
Well, I'm obsessed with her, and she's my main reference when I'm talking about plays. But she was my specialist subject on Mastermind, which I did a few months ago. But She said something that really, because I've just mainly written prose, this book. She said that it was after reading, I think it was reading Virginia Woolf, that she just said, those sentences are so, like, I could never write a sentence that beautiful, so I'm never going to attempt prose. But there are points, because I've only written script before writing a book, and but there are points in the book where I change to a scripted bit, and the relief of doing that is, oh my god, thank god. And I think it's partly because if it's like written badly or it's bad grammar, I can blame the speaker,
the character,
and I find not that playwriting is so hard, but there's a sort of, I'm much quicker at just reported speech than having to sort of construct beautiful sentences is exhausting. So it's like I can't wait to go back to writing script. Yeah. But prose doesn't appeal.
No, I love reading prose. Yeah. Absolutely love it. But I think I don't feel like I'm alone when I'm writing a script. I'm such an extrovert. I'm a textbook extrovert. Right. When you take the Myers-Briggs test, I was 92%, which is at that point an affliction. It's quite stressful how much I need to be around other people to feel normal. It has gone down. I think it's gone down probably because of lockdown. So I'm now like 78%, which is still loads. Yeah. But if I'm like writing a scene, I feel like I can pretend I'm with other people. I imagine if I was writing prose, I'd just feel like I was a writer writing alone. I think I'd be intimidated by the task and find it hard.
Because you're just listening to your own narration when you're writing. It's like a dialogue with self, and it is pretty bizarre. Because my book is, because it's a memoir, it's obviously quite personal, and it does feel very revealing and scary to write this stuff. But it's, someone asked me about it, and I realised that showing someone my idea of good writing is as vulnerable, if not more, than writing about something that once happened to me, because I think we've all had bad things happen to us. Like, that's not that shocking actually, but I think that was as vulnerable, just sort of showing someone your idea of good writing is really vulnerable and horrible.
And I think almost the reason that like I find writing plays or writing scripts, like stuff for TV, is a bit easier is because like when you're writing drama, it's about what happens, it's about the do, it's about drama. But I feel like with prose, the thing that's hard is like it is like what good writing is more of a thing at the forefront of it.
Yeah, you can't rely on bodies in space to do something or hit someone. I've heard quite a lot of playwrights say that dialogue is absolutely last. So it's like it's months of planning, and then it's like they'll actually start writing it quite late in the process. Is that, or are you more kind of riffing, writing and seeing where it goes?
So this comes back to my favourite thing that I talk about in workshops as well, which is like, apparently there are two different kinds of writers, which obviously is wrong because binaries are bad. Yeah, but that being said, like apparently there's two kinds. There's the bird and the worm. Oh, okay. And the bird like flies above it all and is like, ooh, like gonna plan it all out and then I'm gonna write it. Whereas the worm, it's like, I don't know where I'm going, I'm just underground, like, blah, blah, blah. But it's funny though, because the play that I've been working on this year, I've had to be a worm. Like, it sort of forced me in the direction to be like, hey, we don't know where this is going. And it is, like you were saying, like very episodic. Yeah. And it's kind of like talking about a huge thing, but almost the only way that you can talk about it is through lots of weird, random, seemingly unconnected scenes.
I can tell that like all this research must have gone into High Table, but what were you reading around? Like, were you reading and you didn't know why you were reading it, or were you, and then you'd sense something would happen, you'd be like, oh, okay, that little piece came from here? And
that was, I think, mainly like internet like articles, rather than like film. But yeah, of course. But like it would be more like, oh, I think like I'd sort of know that I needed to understand something about like pre-colonial Yoruba mythology and like deities, so I'd like go and like just randomly Google all of that. And like, because like Brazil, strangely enough, has quite a lot of like the heritage of like lots of Yoruba mythology, I'd like look into like Brazilian, like Afro-Brazilian like culture. So I think sometimes it would just be like a sort of internet wormhole where I'd like be a worm.
The worm again. The worm in its wormhole. Yeah. What are you reading at the moment for the latest play?
Akala Natives. but as an audiobook, because
Right.
that's the only way I can ingest information nowadays. And also he
Yeah.
has a really great voice.
And you can do the washing up at the same time.
Yes.
And you feel like you're
Well,
working.
like go for a walk. That was the thing. I think I found that really useful, going for a walk and listening to it.
Yeah, the rhythm of it sometimes, isn't it? When you're
Yeah.
walking and listening, it's like...
Because sometimes if I listen before bed, I just like can't sleep because I'm so excited by what I'm listening to.
Yes, I know that. I read such intense things before bed that either I get really adrenalised or
Yeah.
I'll get an idea, or I'm just like too much empathy for what's happening.
And then also, I don't know, I finished a really good murder mystery as an audiobook, and then it was like 5 a.m. I was like, I have no one I can call and talk to about this huge experience I've just had, and it's quite stressful.
There's something that Annie Baker said which I love, that when you do any sort of playwriting course, one of the trad things they always say is what your characters want, and her whole thing is, the reason she loves Chekhov is because she feels like these people are wandering around, they don't know what they want, because who knows what they want in life.
Yeah.
And that they're all just projected onto each other and hurting each other, and no one really knows what they want.
Yeah.
And because I was thinking I'd love to be brave enough to write like that. So I guess my first question is, do you feel fearless when you write? And how do we, if you don't, then how can, because I think it's so important, but I don't quite know how to do it yet.
That's a beautiful question. I don't know how to answer it. I feel like, I don't know if I feel fearless, but I feel like it's the left side brain thing where, like, if I can just turn off.
Yeah.
And also I usually write longhand when I first do a scene. So like the computer is like, I'm at a desk, there's a keyboard.
Yeah.
You know, this has to be good. I can delete it, but it has to be good.
Too
Whereas if I'm
formal.
scribbling,
I agree.
I feel like
I
that
like
makes
to
me
be on
more
the
fearless.
sofa, like, oh, this isn't real writing.
Yeah.
This is like a businessman or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that helps. But it's mainly just like being like, right side of my brain, you're not allowed in here today. I'm not going to see you until next week when maybe I'll have a draft. That's
It's
the
like
only way.
the cliche of getting out of your own way, as they say, isn't
Yeah.
it? Has therapy informed your writing in any way, do you think?
Feeling better in yourself helps everything. I don't know if I feel like there's a direct betterment. I just feel like it's like, oh, I know who I am and what I want a bit more, which means there's a bit less chaff in my life, which means that I maybe am less distracted when I am writing.
Yeah, a bit more clarity.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like things have to be semi-healed, a little bit healed, before I can write about them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just going to be a bit of a mess.
Yeah, I saw a play, and I obviously won't mention the name, but like...
Say it after.
Well, it just felt like you've put your unprocessed pain on the stage for everyone to look at, rather than, which feels, I don't want to say indulgent, but it feels like you've done that for yourself, rather than when you make a great piece of art, it's like, I've processed this enough, and you know, maybe it's raw in places, but this is for everyone. Like, everyone can see their pain refracted in it, and they'll be able to get something and heal together. Yeah,
so like this sort of catharsis, it makes me think of something, it's kind of related, something that Roxane Gay said in an interview recently about, well, not recently, but she said that she didn't want to make something that had happened to her too beautiful, because she wanted people to know the sort of horrible, bleak, kind of everyday reality of something. And I thought that's so wise, because I've gone the other way of, I sort of think when I'm writing about something painful, I'm sort of trying to word it beautifully so that people they won't turn away. They'll sort of still get something from it, rather than just go like, oh, why is she writing about that? But I think that's really amazing, to sort of deliberately almost not want someone to go away without feeling a little bit of what you went through.
Pain. That really makes me think of BoJack Horseman.
I've never seen that.
Oh my god, it's so good. There's a bit in it, and I don't think this spoils things because it is quite far in, and I don't think by the time that anyone would watch it, they would have forgotten me saying this by the time you get to it. But one character in it is like trying to write about their trauma and the stuff they've been through, and they're like, I have to be able to write about this because otherwise I've gone through it for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like making it beautiful kind of makes it feel worth it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good and bad thing, but I feel like you can like hold the ugly but also hold the beauty at the same time, and that's the kind of like perfect balance.
Yeah, it's really bonkers because so I've written quite a lot about, because I've lost quite a few people in my life. I've written a lot about loss. And I remember, and some of them are recent losses, and I knew that the book was happening. So there were points where I would be about sort of 70% present at a really horrific thing, because like the other percent is thinking, oh, you know, this will be not a bad chapter. Yeah. Which feels really grubby, but I think that actually that kind of detachment was probably a way of coping and getting through it.
Well, it's funny. Like this week, like went to go see a friend who was like going through something like a kind of like illness thing, and I was like helping her out, and like we're both writing something together, and at one point, and she's also writing a novel, and she was like, yeah, this really sucks, but I am kind of thinking like, oh, maybe I'll put this in the book. And I was like, I was thinking maybe we could have that in a scene with those two. And like, it was a funny like moment where we broke out of the reality of the situation to like be playful and joyous about writing. And I kind of feel like it is actually probably quite healthy. Like there's something, because you're able to recognize like this will end, and in 6 months or 6 days from now or however long it is, I'll be out of this position and I'll be able to laugh about it or recognize it. It's like about perspective more than anything.
Yeah, no, that is healthy. It is strange how having this sort of physical object of a book, it feels as though a lot of that pain is contained in this little thing. It's like a little kind of memento of having been through something in a
That's
good
really
way.
magic.
Well, it sort of helps. It feels as though I can sort of put it, you know, somewhere to rest on a shelf and it's over there, but maybe I'll have some sort of breakdown in 3 years' time when I realise it's all still in my head. A playwright I love was talking about that, and she writes very kind of slow, tender plays, and she was sort of saying that she feels like theatre can be this place of mystery, almost kind of like church.
I feel like that is exactly why I like theatre. Like it's like people like communing and like watching the same thing and having the same like spiritual experience. No, I feel like it's not why I like theatre. It's more like I feel like theatre at its best feels like church, and it feels like a religious experience, and like everyone's gone through the same thing, and like everybody's like moved by the same emotion, and like it feels like you're like worshipping at the altar of humanity rather than like some god in the sky. It's like we're all here and we're all looking at this, and we all feel, and everybody in this room is important because we all have our own stories, and it's like really profound.
It's like the best plays is a feeling of transcendence almost. Also, this playwright has the guts to slow everything down and force you almost to be still and quiet and reflective, and that takes real gut. I really admire that. It's like
that's forcing. So interesting because like that's also a specific version of church. Like it's like a bit like Anglican, like the quietness and the domesticity.
There's the joyous
version. Whereas I feel like the High Table. I mean, that's to say that I think it's achieved my pinnacle of like theatre, which I don't think it necessarily does. But I feel like if it does get close, it's much more of like a Pentecostal happy clappy, like kind of all singing, all dancing kind of church. And it's kind of cool to think about the different kinds of church that different plays could evoke.
Are there any plays you can think of, or performances, or indeed performers that have given you that sense of being moved or connected to something bigger than you, or a sort of quasi-spiritual experience?
I feel like there are loads and loads, and it's quite hard to distill, and I feel like I'm gonna like kick myself like after this, where like I'll probably just accidentally only name like plays by white men, and I'll be like, what have I done? But I think the first time I felt it was actually boring, was watching Hamlet at the RSC, snooze, but it was amazing. And it was one moment, like Laertes said, too much water hast thou, Ophelia, and therefore I forbid my tears. And I think it was like the image of like Ophelia having drowned and him not wanting to cry. Like how the fuck did his brain do that? Like, and I just was hit by this like wave of emotion like I'd never felt before, and it just made me like feel like empathy. And I feel like art or like theatre or like whatever, like performance is always about like trying to like invoke empathy, and like that felt like a real church moment where I was like, everybody is witnessing this person's grief. It's a character, but I just feel so much. And like I think that was like the first moment I noticed it. But like there's loads, like there's this playwright called Anna Devere Smith who like does quite like journalist, and it's nice because she's not a white man, she's a black woman. Yes. But she did this play. It's like verbatim, and it's called Notes from the Field. And I watched it at the Royal Court a few years ago, and she got everyone in the audience to sing Amazing Grace.
Wow.
So like that was the most church I felt,
Yeah,
like in the most
yeah.
like kind of
Did
obvious
everyone
way.
like go
Yeah,
with it?
it's because it was so amazing, because like obviously most people know the words to that song, and like everyone in the audience sang it, and I just was like, it was so amazing, like so spontaneous, so amazing. And like that as a contrast to kind of like, you know, the most traditional thing like a Shakespeare play, like creating a different kind of contract and relationship with the audience was just really amazing.
And also the fact that it's verbatim must have added to that.
Yeah, because it felt true, like the
that this
play.
is a mirror type
Yeah,
feeling.
the material is so true, and we're engaging with it and bearing witness to it in a really active, real way.
Yeah.
It was sick.
I think writers that make the most of the liveness, it's quite a cliche thing to say, not even necessarily breaking the fourth wall, but just like recognizing that there's real people in a real place.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think that's why comedy is so amazing, and why one person plays is so cool, because you're not pretending that there isn't an audience there. Like,
yeah,
that's almost why it's so fun, because it's like, I see you, like,
yeah,
we're doing this.
Which is like amazing how like so much of Hamlet is in that as well. I did it for A level, and I do remember falling in love with it, and just I don't know, it was the first time I felt smart after reading it, like ever in my life. It's like, well, I've sort of understood that.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's hope.
I think also it was like the first time, maybe because I didn't study it, it was the first time I watched a Shakespeare play without reading it first, and like getting the story. And like, I don't know, I just feel like the best theatre. And the reason is this really nerdy book about like why the Renaissance was such a good time for playwriting, and it's because someone makes this argument. I'm going to say the book, so I'm not just plagiarising. It's from this stage play world, and I've forgotten who the writer is, but she talks about the fact that like it was really good for theatre because like everybody had a really specific political consciousness, because there was loads going on. Like it was a time of like political turmoil. But then also everybody had a relationship with like the spirituality, because like most people were religious. And then also it was really normal for poetry to be like part of like the stage play world. So like there's like poetry, spirituality, and like politics, drama, and like the domesticity of life as well. So like it's like hitting like all the different parts of like humanity, like that's in amazing. One thing.
I love the idea that like you could write about gods and ghosts and supernatural, and to that audience it's like not sort of like, oh, it's like yes, it's like, yes, and
yeah,
and so what? Yeah, they're real. Next,
where do we go from here?
Yeah, rather than being sort of like metaphor or symbol, the idea that you'd sort of watch Macbeth and think witches are real would completely change it, because you'd be like, oh well, if the witches did it, then the witches did it.
Then he definitely is going to be king.
Yeah. Something I find quite comforting is that I've come to see the sort of doubt and crisis point when you're writing something, whatever it is, as kind of like an old friend. Like I now accept that hating yourself is part of, it's just part of the creative process. Yeah. And I think I'd almost be more worried now if I didn't go through the mid stage or the just before the end stage of what a pile of shit.
Yeah.
And why do I bother? Like I think I'm trying to protect myself. I think it's like fear and nerves, and I think I still, give into it, and it can be very upsetting because in the moment I believe it and it feels really real. But I think there's 1% of me now that goes, oh, I remember this from another thing. Yeah. And I got through it, and now I try and think, this means I'm in the middle. This means like it's going well because I hate myself. It's going really well.
Someone I did the Royal Court Introduction to Playwriting group, which is kind of what got me into playwriting. And the person who ran my group is called Joe Ward Munro, and he's really great. I love him. And he said this great thing. I think he was quoting someone else, but it was like, every writer who's written something good or important or beautiful will always feel shame, because like shame means that you've like spoken about a personal truth, and that's the only way that like anything is good, because if there's truth in it, then it's so much more likely to be good. And I found that really helpful. Like, it's like, oh yeah, every time that I hate myself and what I'm writing just means that it's maybe a masterpiece. And like, how much shame you feel is maybe a direct relationship to like how good it can be.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I can't wait to read what you write next or see you perform next.
Thanks.
Thank you, Temi.
Can't wait to read your book.